Today in Across the Fence, we celebrate 50 years on the road with Rick Norcross and the Ramblers, and the release of his new CD, Riding My Guitar, and a book of the same title just written by Stephen Russell Payne of St. Albans. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. The two talented men I just mentioned are with us today, but before we meet them, Channel 3's Deanna LeBlanc was at the State House in Montpelier, where Rick Norcross was honored for a half-century in the music business. Let's take a look.
Of course, you want to sing along so you can all be part of legislature.
If you grew up in Vermont, chances are you've heard this guy ramble at least once in your life.
As long as people want to hear it.
For a man whose typical stage is at a state fair, Rick Norcross says it's a thrill to celebrate his golden anniversary under the Golden Dome.
And that's when I heard the highway.
It's absolutely a thrill to play in the State House.
You can't make it up, you can't live it down. That's just the way things happen in this Northeast Kingdom town.
He's been entertaining Vermonters for 50 years with songs they can relate to.
Oh, they're pretty authentic. And I love the music's about Vermont.
It's lively. It gets you right into it, and they have so much fun. You can't help but enjoy watching them.
Elaine Russell and her husband Gary haven't missed a concert in 4 years.
We have some beautiful state parks here in the state of Vermont that we would have never gone if it wasn't for Rick and the Ramblers.
His style is Western swing, and longtime radio DJ Jack Donovan says for many it's a nod to days gone by.
You'd go to the town halls and you'd go to the square dances, and that's the kind of music you'd hear, and he brings back those memories to a lot of folks.
Deanna LeBlanc, Channel 3 News, Montpelier.
Well, thanks, Deanna, for sharing that story with us. And with me now are Rick Norcross and author Stephen Russell Payne. It's great to have you with us. So, Rick, how have you maintained writing, recording, and performing for 50 years?
Well, it's something I love to do, and so it just doesn't seem possible that 50 years has actually gone by. But you just get started and keep going as long as you can.
Mm-hmm. And so your music is called Western swing, and so where did that originate, and what is it about that music that you like?
I actually started out playing folk music in the early 60s, and then I was working on Daytona Beach during Easter week with some members of the Light Crust Doughboys, and that was one of the very first Western swing bands that originated in Fort Worth, Texas. And Western swing is a combination of folk, country, jazz, blues, and it just resonated with me, and so I've kind of carried that banner now for many years.
Mm-hmm. And so, Stephen, how did you discover Rick and the Ramblers, and then how did you decide to write about them?
Well, I just finished editing my novel back in the summer of 2010 and was looking for a short story to write. And I knew of Rick, and I met him, and both being from the Northeast Kingdom, we really hit it off. And I immediately was attracted to him as really a crossroads between all kinds of musical people, musicians, people who like different kinds of music. And if you spend 5 minutes with Rick, he starts telling you Northeast Kingdom stories, many of which are hysterical. And I really felt like I'd hit the mother lode of Vermont characters. And we've worked about 3 years on this project together. And we still speak to each other. And I think the story is really remarkable.
What made him so unusual to you as far as a character to write about?
Well, one of the coolest things about Rick, he grew up in East Hardwick, played at the Tulip Festival at age 16, and lived over the toy shop at the Shelburne Museum for 10 years until age 16. When he learned how to play the guitar from a neighbor, Harold Pash, in East Hardwick, within a couple of years, he was actually writing really good original songs, ended up in England working with Paul Simon and Donovan and these Americans that were on the British folk scene at the time, and continued to really go out into the world in Florida, all over the East Coast of the U.S., and then brought it all back to Vermont, which is part of the cool part of his story, and has really continued through the Green Mountain Choo Choo Festival, through the Ramblers over the last 30 plus years, to have really brought back all of his musical experiences from around the world back to Vermont, and been a huge force in giving Vermont musicians opportunities to play and learn and be in his bands and festivals and that sort of thing. And it's really unique. He's had a huge impact on the music scene, not just here, but on both continents.
Well, Rick, with the help of some photos, many of which are in Stephen's book, let's take a look at some of the highlights of your career, which is great.
Okay. We were playing at Cypress Gardens. In 1963, I brought Tom Azarian and Bud Boydston down to do a folk music program at Florida Southern College and toured around the state a little bit.
And then next we have?
And next, this was taken when I was over in London, and a bunch of British jazz musicians, Diz Disley and a lot of Johnny Chesko and all these folks were part of a scene and a club that I used to play regularly.
Okay.
This is my 18-string guitar that a fellow named John Bailey built for me in London. And in 1966 and 1967, I was wearing a military band uniform jacket, and then the Beatles came out with Sgt. Pepper's, and I had to move along and not wear that anymore. I still have it, though.
Awesome.
No, it doesn't fit. This is a publicity photograph for the 18th String Coffee House and Music Emporium that I ran for 2 years in Tampa in 1967 and 1968.
Okay, next.
Love
the hair.
Thanks very much. I was actually going out in public playing, looking like that. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I actually had two wonderful opportunities to play at the Flynn Theater back before it became a nonprofit. And this was with Jimmy C. Newman and Cajun Country, and I also played with Hank Williams' Drifting Cowboys at the Flynn.
And next?
Here's a publicity shot with my 1959 Rambler. I've had a succession of Ramblers, that hence the name Rick and the Ramblers.
And next?
This was at the Florida State Fair. That's Little Joyce and the Sensations, and Dana Levine and Tony Washburn, Vermonters that came down to play with me in Tampa with my band down there as well. I played at the State Fair for 14 years. And here's another great fair. This is the Eastern States Exposition. We've played on Vermont Day 4 times at the Big E, and we're scheduled there again on Vermont Day at September 21st this year.
Awesome.
And that's my band, Rick and the Ramblers. That's the band that I've been playing with for about, these folks have been in my band, this particular band, for about 6 years. And they're great. And we were, 50 years ago, I played the Tulip Festival, as Steve mentioned, and May 25th, 50 years to the day, I played at the Hardwick Townhouse as part of the Spring Festival, and that's a shot from a few weeks ago.
Well, I know that the two of you are teaming up to do some shows around the state. The next one is coming up Sunday, June 30th. It's at the Grand Isle Lake House in beautiful Lake Champlain Islands, with picnicking on the lawn at 5:30, and the show starts at 6:30. Tickets are $20 in advance and $25 at the door. The tickets are available through the Flynn Theater box office or by going to flyntix.org. Tickets are also available at distribution centers in Grand Isle County, and to locate those, you can call 802-372-8889. Proceeds from the event will help support the Island Arts Youth Scholarship Fund. Now, Steve, in researching Rick's life, you interviewed some well-known musicians, and what were some of the things that you heard?
It was really cool. Rick kind of gave me a list of musicians that he'd worked with over the years, and thankfully they were very enthusiastic about talking to me. And I talked to people really all over the world about Rick, and some of the ones that really stand out are Panama Red, who's still performing today. He actually credits Rick with giving him his start back at his coffee house in Florida. Carolyn Hester, who is a very big folk singer back in the 1960s, who's still performing, really considers Rick a jewel. And again, she actually helped Rick get his start in many ways, but she still talks about him as, you know, one of her very good friends. Promoters in England still remember Rick as really changing the British folk scene. They had never met anyone like him. He did a lot of comedic folk parodies, and by the mid-60s, things had gotten a little staid on the British folk scene. And when Rick started performing some of his really hysterical routines and comedic parodies, it just livened up the British folk scene all over England, and they still talk about the influence that he had back then.
And so, Rick, you were a music writer and photographer, too, for the Tampa Times from 1969 to 74, and you got to meet and photograph some of the best in the business.
Yes, Tampa was the 13th biggest market in America at that time, Judy, and so everybody came down through there except the Who and the Beatles were pretty much done by that, but everyone else came down through there, and I had a chance to. It was my job to cover them, and I had total free reign on who I covered.
Wow. So let's take a look at some of your photographs.
Well, okay. There's Elvis.
Yeah, this is a great photograph.
Pretty rare because Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, forbade any photographs taken. They threw out a New York Times photographer right next to me, and I was shooting available light, and this I was able to get this one. Thank you.
Next.
This is Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, and this was the largest single rock concert for many, many years. It was 63,000 people in Tampa Stadium.
And clearly you were up close.
I had on stage, backstage, and front row access to every one of these stars because of my coverage.
Awesome. Let's take a next look. Okay.
This is Cher. As you can see, I was standing right behind her on stage.
And next.
And this is Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, and this woman just jumped out of the audience, and he was not impressed.
He does not look happy.
He was not. And this is Janis Joplin, a shot of her at the West Palm Beach Rock Festival. This was shortly before she died.
Okay.
And this is Bob Dylan and the band. Dylan had been down for 7 or 8 years as a result of a motorcycle accident in Woodstock, New York, and Levon Helm is on the drums there, and it was a fantastic show. There wasn't a missed note, and it was really exciting at the Sportatorium down at West Palm Beach. Yeah, believe it or not, that's me in the middle.
Yep, with the hair, love it.
Well, thank you, Judy.
And so those photos and many others are on display at the Island Arts Gallery at the Merchants Bank in South Hero. Steve, to wrap up, what do you think Rick means to the Vermont music scene and beyond?
One of the great songwriters that I spoke to who's worked with Rick a lot is Leroy Preston, another Vermonter who is really a legendary songwriter himself. And he describes Rick as one of the best wordsmiths he's ever met. And the other thing he talked about is how Rick really has done it all. He's a writer, he's a performer, he's a wonderful music producer, and I think Rick has really become a crossroads for all kinds of musicians, all kinds of music in Vermont, and probably more than anyone I've ever learned about, has provided opportunities for Vermont musicians to play on all kinds of stages, whether it was the Choo Choo or with the Ramblers now. He actually has a young girl, Julia Shannon Grillo, who plays with the Ramblers as a guest performer now, who started singing with the Ramblers around age 8, which is just pretty cool. Rick's slightly older than that, but
60 years.
So he's really truly iconic on the Vermont music scene, and still going full blast, recording some of the best music he's ever recorded.
Mm-hmm. You must love to see young people like that take an interest in music and want to perform.
It's pretty neat, and Julie is a wonderful singer, and the younger folks kind of gather around her when we finish playing, and it is terrific. We want to keep the music going. That's the deal. And so I concentrate on writing about Vermont and about Vermont stories and people.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can't finish this up without talking about probably one of the most famous parts of Rick and the Ramblers, which of course is the pickle.
Right. The Pickle is my 1957 flexible Starliner tour bus, and I've ridden it around the roads of Vermont for about 14 years, and it was looking pretty rough, and so I had a Paint the Pickle campaign last summer, last spring, and a bunch of my friends and fans from all over the world kicked in a good portion of what it took to have Barry Bassett up in Hardwick at Wildcat Busing do a fantastic job restoring it. So you can see it all around Vermont this summer where we play.
The Pickle's back.
The Pickle is back, looking beautiful.
I want to thank you both for being with us. And a quick reminder, too, you can see these two men in action at the Grand Isle Lake House Sunday, June 30th. Picnicking starts at 5:30. The show starts at 6:30. Steve will be signing his book, and Rick his new CD, with profits going to the Island Arts Youth Scholarship Fund. Now, I know you also wanted to just mention, too, another fundraiser.
Yes, I'm going to donate a portion of proceeds to the Lake Champlain Land Trust, which is truly a wonderful preservation organization that has worked to keep a lot of the natural areas, the islands, et cetera, intact in the Lake Champlain area. And so we're partnering with them also.
Okay. And Rick, just one last question for you. You encourage dancing, do you, at your
Absolutely.
concerts?
You kidding me? Absolutely. That's it's up-tempo, wonderful dance music. That's where it all came from, Western Swing.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Judy.
Judy.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX TV.